Hello and welcome to Building Back Better, What Next for Dorset? Thank you for joining us this evening. Tonight is part of Bournemouth University's online public lecture series, showcasing some of the university's research and expertise. Tonight, our panel of experts from Bournemouth University and from industry will be discussing some of the key issues facing our region, from post-pandemic recovery to the future of our high streets. We're using a platform called Crowdcast for tonight's event. For those of you who haven't used this before, there's just a few features to be aware of. Firstly, we're not going to be able to see or hear you. Only our speakers will have their cameras and their microphones turned on. That means that the best way to interact with us and with each other is through the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. Please do use this throughout the event to share any thoughts, comments, observations, or feedback that you have and respond to the points our speakers are making. We really want to hear from you as well this evening. You can also pose questions for our speakers to answer throughout the discussion using the Ask a Question box at the bottom right of your screen. Please do post your questions in there and our panel will try and get through as many as they can over the course of the evening. If you spot a question in there that you'd particularly like our panel to answer, then please do click on the arrow to the left of the question to upvote it, and the questions that are the most popular will be answered by our panels this evening. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Shelley Thompson from our business school, who is going to be chairing the discussion this evening and will introduce our speakers. Over to you, Shelley.
Thanks so much, Emma. Hi, everyone. I'm Shelley Thompson. I am Deputy Dean of the Bournemouth University Business School, and I'm delighted to be here with you tonight and so thrilled to have such a great set of panel members to help us discuss this important topic, especially as we are coming through the pandemic. I'm thrilled to be able to represent the Bournemouth University Business School, which has a real dedication to responsible and empathetic ways of doing business and thinking about ways that we can make a difference. And we do that through our research, which includes some top research in tourism and hospitality, which is an important sector here in this region, but also through the work that is done by a range of our scholars who work in every field around management and leadership, considering retail and the impact of the changing face of our high street, and so much more, including sustainable business transformations. So we're thrilled to be here, and I'll ask each of our panel members to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about themselves, and maybe I'll kick off with some questions once we've heard from all of our panel members. I'll start with Nigel. Nigel, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Nigel Jump. I'm an economist. Don't hold that against me. I've spent 20 years in the private sector, analysing different countries and different industries and their growth prospects and so on. And I spent another 20 years, in particular, looking at regional economic development, particularly here in the southwest of England. So hopefully I have some knowledge which will help the discussion tonight. Thank you.
Absolutely, it will. Thanks so much, Nigel. I'm going to turn to Jackie next.
Yeah, thank you. And good evening to everybody listening. I really appreciate you obviously asking me to join you today. So my background predominantly is actually in investment bank management, and I've been on Bournemouth Chamber of Trade and Commerce for the past 10 years. I'm currently president, but I'm actually representing this evening because I'm actually the lead for Poole BID, which stands for Business Improvement District, which effectively we sit between BCB Council and the High Street, looking to identify ways to encourage footfall into the area and obviously benefiting our business on the High Street as much as we can.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Jackie. And lucky last, we'll turn to Ian.
Good evening, everybody. Hello, my name is Ian Girling. I'm the Chief Executive of Dorset Chamber. We're the Chamber of Commerce for the county, accredited by the British Chambers of Commerce. Our role is very straightforward. We are there to help businesses grow and prosper. We do that through delivery of business services, not just to our members, but also to the wider business community. And we provide a really powerful voice for business on lobbying for issues at both with key partners such as the Local Enterprise Partnership and local authorities. We work very closely with BU as well. And we're there to really help provide a really strong voice for business as well. That's it in a nutshell.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. I'm going to ask all of our panel members, but I'd love to hear from the audience as well in the chat. The first question I want to kind of kick off the discussion with is, what is the biggest challenge facing Dorset? And I will start with Ian on that, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm going to really comment from the business perspective. I think probably there's two major challenges facing business at the moment, if I can. I think one is a people issue. Sometimes that's referred to as a skill shortage. I think it's much more than that. I think we have a real shortage of people at the moment. Lots of vacancies, which is the opposite of what we expected coming out of COVID, and simply not enough people to fill those roles. That's a massive challenge for businesses and holding back growth. I think the other huge challenge facing Dorset businesses at the moment are rising costs, and the cost of living all feeling as consumers, but businesses are also really feeling that in terms of increased upward wage pressure, increased energy costs, cost of raw materials, etc. So I would say costs and people are the two key issues that are facing businesses at this moment, at this time.
Thanks so much for that, Ian. I'll go to Jackie next.
Well, I think Ian's probably stolen my thunder a little bit, because those are the 2 points that I was going to mention. I think that would probably be on everybody's lips, to be honest. But if I had to add another one, obviously the general culture change with the high street. Obviously, a lot of our businesses are on the high street, and, online shopping. And obviously, I think that the pandemic just expedited really what was going to happen eventually anyway. And it's trying to find a way that we can actually move forward and look at high streets in a different way.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Jackie. Nigel.
Well, the key word for me at the moment is stagflation. We're in a period of slow growth, less than trend growth, and high inflation, higher than usual inflation price increases. Those things impact businesses locally very strongly in different ways, from hospitality to manufacturing to agriculture to all kinds of different sectors that are affected in different ways. And that's related to a second problem, which is basically supply chains. Are we in the right markets? Have we got the right products? Are we talking to the right people about trading with them, both in the UK and obviously overseas, which we've particularly made difficult for ourselves?
Thanks so much for that, Nigel. I could see that Jackie and Ian were nodding along to those things, and it seems like our panel is largely in agreement around some of the challenges facing our communities. Did either of you want to come in on that and any kind of follow up? I can see that our colleagues have also dropped in a link. Is that something that you've written for us, Nigel? Do you know? It's a blog post, it looks like.
About once a month for the university, and that's just the latest one, which is focusing on stagflation. So it's relevant to what I've just said.
Brilliant, brilliant. So, I mean, if we pick up on the threads that that Ian and Jackie started us off on around the people problem and the challenges that we're facing around jobs and skills. Ian, you started by talking a little bit about the fact that we have vacancies. Are there particular skills that you think that we're really lacking, or are we losing people? Because we've got 3 brilliant universities and we've got a great education sector, if I can be so bold as to say that, as one that I think is one of the brilliant universities. But we've got great education in this region. So what are your thoughts on the kind of jobs and skills in Dorset that we have now and that we need for the future?
Well, I think we've obviously been through Brexit, so I'm going to talk about skills at all levels. And many businesses are feeling the pain of Brexit, in as much as lots of their potential labour supply has gone back to their home countries. So that's an issue that's definitely being felt by businesses. I think as we come through the pandemic, the world of business has been changing hugely, and the way that we recruit and the way that we employ people is changing as well. We obviously know that there has been a huge shift towards not pure home working, but hybrid working, and now that's kind of established itself very quickly as the norm. And many people will argue against that, many people argue for it, but it's something that we definitely have to be aware of as employers and have to make ourselves as attractive as possible to potential employees. I think gone are the days when you had a candidate in front of you looking for a job and you just expected that candidate to say, why do you want to work here? I think as businesses, you almost have to sell your business to that person equally for them to want to come and work for you, really. So there's a really big shift, I think, that's been taking place, and I think that will continue as we move forward. I think in terms of which sectors are we talking about, I see skills shortages and skills issues across a whole range of areas, and it really very much is an employee market. You can very much choose where you want to work. And as I mentioned earlier, I think what we're seeing is the opposite of what was expected. Businesses actually did fare the pandemic much better than anticipated. I think a lot of that was down to the government, and there is a huge amount of pent-up demand within the economy. So whilst we are seeing a really challenging environment in terms of those issues that we talked around, there is a huge amount of pent-up demand, and businesses I speak to are actually very, very busy, and a lot of demands for their products and services, and the challenge is actually meeting that demand with the constraints that they're facing at the moment.
Absolutely. I can see Jackie nodding along. Is there anything you want to add in on that point?
There's been very much a culture change in people's minds since the pandemic. I think people may have been in a role for 30, 40, however many years, and they went through the pandemic. They either were furloughed or worked from home, and it gave them an opportunity to think, do I want to do this any longer? So I think we've also got that rush of people thinking, actually, no, I don't, and I want to move on. Some retired, and so yeah, there's kind of a gap in the market. The benefit of that, obviously, is the fact that we probably have got more entrepreneurs in that way, wanting to do different things and so on and so forth. But it has obviously left a gap where before we were reliant on people that were doing a role for a long time. So yeah, that's the only thing really I wanted to add.
Thanks so much, Jackie. That kind of makes me think a little bit about potentially the changing, the changing in the workforce and how might that influence the wider economy. And I don't know if Nigel, if that's something that you might want to comment on, or if there's anything you want to bring in around any of the points that Ian and Jackie have raised for us so far.
I mean, the key problem for the economy in Dorset and also wider in the UK is productivity, and productivity is driven by what you invest in, and what you invest in is mainly innovation and skills. And we've talked about skills to some extent. I fully agree with what the other panelists have said, but I'll just add that it's also future skills. It's those anticipating those skills that we're going to need. If we're in an economy which has to be more domestically resilient, if we're in an economy that has to be more green, if we're in an economy that aerospace is different because we're not traveling the same, or we're traveling different because of what's happened in the last few years, there's a lot of potential new skills or new emphasis on skills which we need to think about carefully, as well as the immediate shortages that we're facing on a day-to-day basis. And then on the innovation side, I would say Dorset has a pretty good reputation, especially some of our key firms, of being good at innovation. It's small scale, and Dorset is relatively small scale. And the key question for me is how Dorset competes in the UK wider market and how we compete internationally. And that's about, as I said earlier, which supply chains are we in, what products are we producing, what services are we selling, and how innovative we are in those fields.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think our region, I was reading something the other day where it was something like 80 to 90% of the local economy is in our small to medium enterprises. We've got some really small organizations that are so important to our region. And this is just throwing this out to the panel and thinking about who might want to jump in. What does that do for us? And does that create an opportunity for Dorset, or is that part of the challenges that we're facing? Or have I just been really mean and picked like a really difficult question? Ian, over to you.
I think you make small businesses is a really valid point, but not one that's unique to Dorset. I haven't got the exact statistics, but by far the majority of businesses are businesses under 10, and they are generally the largest employers within, within not just Dorset, but within the whole of the UK. Businesses under 10, micro businesses, are incredibly important within the economy, and we're not just talking about smaller businesses. I think larger businesses, sorry. And we've obviously got some huge businesses in Dorset, Sunseeker, JP Morgan, where I was today. Fantastic businesses that we have here in Dorset, but also we do need to really look after those much smaller businesses and understand the challenges that they face within their businesses. The business owner will be the HR director, the finance director. We'll have to do everything, and that's why we need to do all we can to support particularly those smaller businesses, I would say.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Ian. I'm just noticing in the chat, we've got a lot of comments really linked into some of the wider infrastructure, things like affordable housing and also our transport routes. And that kind of links to a question that came in from Nigel in the Ask a Question section about the importance of public transport infrastructure, especially in terms of reaching the outer parts of our region, and thinking about the different kinds of options that are available to us now, from bikes and scooters and so on. So what is the potential for developing and integrating our public transport system and preparing ourselves both for now and for the future? And I'm not just thinking about the kind of the struggles that we might face at the petrol pump. Jackie, I don't know if there's any of those threads that you might want to pick up on as it links into the work that you're doing.
Yeah, sure. So personally, I actually feel our transport links are really good. We've got a really good, we're 2 hours away from London. And the fact that obviously I know that the council have been working hard on a project called Transforming Travel, which is obviously all around, you've seen obviously the roads where they have created cycle paths and so on and so forth. If I talk about Poole in particular, we've got a train station, a bus station, even boats that can link people to other areas as well. And we've got a prom where you can literally cover the whole of our area by bike or scooter. So I actually think they are good opportunities. I am aware that the buses, certainly more bus and yellow buses, have been really affected by the pandemic because obviously lockdown really didn't help them and they've had to reduce their bus routes. And similarly with trains, I mean, when you think about Europe and how reasonably priced these opportunities are, we need to find ways that we can actually make buses and trains and so on and so forth much more reasonably priced so people are encouraged to actually use them more. I think we lack that, if I'm honest. I have no problem going to Poole on the train, but I couldn't do it every day. And I think those are the types of things we need to really be looking at much more deeply so that people can use them much more frequently.
Ian, do you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, I just come in on the kind of transport side of things. I think transport, while we live in the conurbation, it's pretty good. It's not brilliant. My children use buses, and there's lots of times when you would think buses should be available, and they're not. But I think when you start to look outside of the conurbation, I think transport becomes absolutely vital, where we really do see rural isolation. And we mustn't forget the wider Dorset outside of BCP. And transport, as I said, is absolutely vital in those communities. And I think it's a real problem, and it's a particular issue for young people as well. Young people in terms of perhaps accessing further or higher education once they leave school at a local level, finding those opportunities, those job opportunities, training opportunities, apprenticeship opportunities. Rural isolation is a massive problem, and rural isolation leads to deprivation. And we know we have some real issues around that in Dorset, and they really do need focus.
Nigel, did you want to jump in?
Add to that, it's not just transport in rural areas and so on. It's also, economists often link transport and communications together, and I would do that here. Communications is important as well. So whether it's physical movement of people or whether it's virtual movement of people, both are important if you want to get your rural parts connected with your urban parts.
Sure, Ian, back to you.
Sorry, I'll just make one point. I completely agree with Nigel. We learned how to use, we really got our heads around technology, particularly video conferencing during the pandemic. I think it's really important that we embrace what we learned and make sure we don't forget that. you know, and we do continue with that shift to being able to communicate and work together and learn online as much as face to face. It's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can see in the chat and in the questions the cost and the coordination of our transport links and the collaboration that, you know, what opportunities are there for us to see the collaboration and potentially the cross you know, the kind of cross utilization of some of those transport links. And I can see Nigel Jones has dropped a suggestion in there where we can learn from other cities that have seen some really brilliant innovations in their public transport. Are there any things like that we might specifically or particularly like for our region? Nigel, did you want to go?
Yeah, it's important that we think about north and west. East is not really a problem in the sense that we're connected to everything east, and we're just about in a good time zone in terms of contact with London and the rest of it. It's the west and north that's always been the problem in Dorset for transport and communications, and that's where I would put the emphasis on. As to what we can actually do, problem is, of course, people don't want new roads, people don't want new railway lines, they don't want new stuff in their backyards. So we have a cultural problem about what is good for the population, what is good for the economy, and what is good for local people. But the politicians need to address that. I hesitated to use the word politicians today, but obviously that's their problem rather than my problem.
I mean, some of this links into big questions around tourism. And if you think about kind of coming into potentially the Bournemouth Travel Interchange through the train station or wherever, and think about the way that we might, you know, visitors to our communities might see and the aesthetics of the communities that we're inviting people to come and be a tourist in. Magda's put a question in the Ask a Question section about the appearance of Bournemouth and thinking about that kind of route from the train station through to the beach and what people might see, and whether it's the inviting and aesthetically pleasing kind of way that we might want to present our region, our communities on an individual basis. But then again, thinking about what is, you know, what are we inviting people into all the parts of Dorset when we're inviting tourism? Jackie, do you want to pick some of that up? I know it's for Poole bid, but it's the same kind of questions to relate.
Yeah. So again, I don't really want to pick up on politicians, but I am aware that obviously BCP Council in particular have created a project called Our Big Plan. I think they did it about a year ago, and they're looking at all the areas around that, regeneration, all that kind of thing. And the leader himself says that he wants to make this a world-class resort. Now, obviously, that a lot of work involved in that, but we only have to see European cities, for example, that highlight how clean they are, how aesthetically pleasing they are. And it's kind of, that's the guideline really that we need to go for, because at the moment we aren't hitting that mark. But I know that they are going ways to actually trying to achieve that. There's an initiative at the moment that they're looking across. Again, I can't really talk so much about Dorset because it's not my area of expertise, but certainly for BCP, they're looking at a cleaner, greener, safer campaign, bins being replaced, lampposts being painted, benches being painted, etc. And obviously a lot of floral items throughout the town can make a big difference. And I think that also leads into looking at ways where people will look after the town, because I think how the towns are at the moment, people haven't got that incentive to actually keep things nice because they look outside and they don't see that. So there's a big push towards that. And I think that's a really important thing, because I think that will also encourage people to come and want to have staycations and also move here. So yeah, it's all of those things put together really, and we need to work really hard on getting it right.
Thanks for that, Jackie. Nigel?
Yeah, it's interesting. This is what people like me call public realm. So it's all the things that exist to make a place look nice or to appear attractive. It's got a checkered history. In some cases, there's been lots of money spent on public realm. It's had no impact at all on local tourism or retail or those kind of businesses. It's done really, really well. So it's got to be done in a fantastic way. I mean, the classic example from the textbooks is Baltimore. Baltimore was a rundown, industrial, declining city, and it's been turned around by some really good public realm and other stuff. And the key thing that where it seems to work is where business, the private sector, is involved with the public sector. So it isn't just BCP Council who has to do this. The local firms have to be involved. They have to want to make Poole High Street look better. They have to want to make the journey from the Bournemouth railway station to other parts of Bournemouth feel nicer, feel welcoming. And so it's a public-private partnership you need for that kind of thing.
Go ahead, Ian.
I think just to kind of build on the points that have been made, I think Jackie's right, and the council have got the big plan, definitely, and we speak to the politicians about this a lot, all of us do in our jobs, but there is still a long way to go, and we need to really focus on that. You know, the high streets have taken an absolute battering over the last couple of years. This isn't just Bournemouth and Poole, this is larger towns across the whole of the UK. But there really needs to be a massive focus on this, and sometimes I think a bit of a reality check, to be quite honest. We need to make sure that towns feel really safe, and that's not always the case. That they're really clean, again, that's not always the case. And we know that we really suffer sometimes with antisocial behaviour, and these are all issues that really need focus. You know, the visitor experience needs to be far more than sitting on the beach. The town centre, whether that's Bournemouth, Poole, wherever, is a critical part of that tourist experience. And we know retail is changing, but retail is still a really important part of people's holiday as well.
Absolutely. And I can see there are some suggestions in the chat. I think it's Nigel that's, put in some suggestions. The Kingsland Crescent was a positive experiment, he says, and visiting Bridport feels like a positive experience. So do we get the feel right in our region? And what are some of the things that we could potentially do or be looking to partner around to try to address some of those? Jackie?
Yeah, obviously Nigel mentioned Kingsland Crescent. Yeah, that is a real coup, to be honest. Obviously, it's in my district. And the reason that was able to be moved forward is because Legal and General own all of the shops in that area. The dilemma that we have is that, for example, across the rest of Poole, there are different landlords that own different buildings and they dictate who goes in. And so that can actually create a visitor experience for perhaps that we don't want if it's if I can say, the lower level retail, but we have no say over that. And that's the dilemma. I think what it needs is the council, and as Nigel quite rightly said, business people to actually get together with landlords to try to create some kind of aesthetic like Kingsland across more of the high street and make it much more of an experience and a destination than they are at the moment.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jackie. I can also see in the kind of ask a question section, I think it was Michelle, who's an artist working in theater and storytelling, she says, and living in the area, and talking about the potential for a cultural regeneration and what role can things like culture and storytelling and art help to build back better for our region. I had the chat open. So yeah, go ahead, Jackie, jump right in, because I was trying to scroll through and it blocks Ian on my screen.
No, that's fine. Absolutely. Storytelling, culture, absolutely one of the most important things, I think, because certainly Bournemouth probably hasn't got as much culture as Poole and Christchurch, but it still has culture or history. So we really need to work on those things. you know, putting up something like some murals across the high street that tell a story, anything like that. We can digitalize things now to pull people across the high street, so they're not just going to one place that seems to have everything. So for Poole, for example, it's the Quay. You know, it's important that we actually encourage people to move right across our high streets, and again, not just in Poole, Bournemouth and Christchurch, the main high streets, but also somehow create some kind of brand identity for those smaller districts right across BCP and into Dorset as well. It's not just limiting it to one area, and maybe having quarters or something that we can create a different feel in different areas to encourage people into them.
Right. Thanks, Jackie. I mean, I know we have a number of really popular festivals, arts festivals by the sea and things of that nature, and other things. Most of the ones that are coming to top of mind are the one that Bournemouth University is pretty active in, and the other universities are active in, like the BFX Festival and stuff like that, which is a real celebration of art in lots of different forms. If we think about them across the region, and there are some really nice ones that kind of exist outside of Bournemouth, Christchurch, and Poole. That, you know, to what extent do those kinds of activities and events help us to see our region and to see wider parts of our region and showcase all that we have to offer here in Dorset? Any thoughts? I don't know if we have an economist take potentially on festivals and what that can bring to a region. If I can put you on the spot,
the key
Nigel?
thing for me is what is Dorset selling itself as. We don't have. We're not Venice. We don't have something that's obviously attractive and been there for hundreds of years. We're not London. We don't have all the different historical sites and places to go in London. So what is it about Bournemouth, Poole, and the rest of Dorset that we're actually selling that's attracting people? It isn't just bucket and spade tourism. What is it? And I think that's key. We need to. So if we're going to think about festivals and think about those kind of events, they have to fit in with the kind of thing that the Bournemouth and Poole and Dorset is selling itself as. And that's always been difficult because there are different parts of the county with very different histories in terms of tourism. In Weymouth, tourism is very different from Bournemouth tourism in some ways. Obviously, places like Blandford and Dorchester are selling a different kind of model than other places. So it's having an image that we can promote, which covers all these different bases and provides and says Dorset is special, Dorset is unique. That's what we need to do.
Thanks so much, Nigel. While you were chatting, I was just kind of scrolling through some of the questions just to see what other ones we can pick up on that might link into this discussion or help us to, think about some of the other things. Some of the questions that are popping up and comments in the chat include things like the empty buildings and the empty storefronts and what that does. I think that kind of links into some of the questions around the aesthetics of the region, but also around the sort of livelihood and both in terms of individuals who might work and shop and move around our region to take advantage of the shopping. And it goes back to the point Ian made a little bit earlier about the role that retail plays in a tourist destination. But what do we know what's happening in some cases with the boarded up sites that we kind of see, and how that might how we might see our high streets change, and what kinds of things we think needs to go in there. Jackie, jump in.
Yeah, so obviously I think it would be true to say that the Bournemouth in terms of BCP is suffering more than Christchurch and Poole. The shame of it is that obviously they had a number of department stores that have suddenly closed down within a 2-3 year period, and obviously it's leaving large gaping holes in those areas. Obviously they are starting to fill them, but again it goes back to my point about landlords dictating what goes in, so it still feels a little bit disjointed is probably the best way to explain it. Having said that, I talked about the big plan earlier, and I know I'm going to have to read this just because it's probably better coming from something that I printed. I know they have a number of objectives as part of the big plan. Objective 1, they're saying, is high street mixed use supporting independent and small businesses, landlord and agent forums for optimal tenant mix to occupy at sustainable rents and business rates. So, for example, like Kingland, and an empty shops initiative working with the above forum and planning policy to encourage mixed use ground floor level. Really important. If they can get landlords speaking to businesses, speaking to the council and speaking to key stakeholders, that's the way we need to go. Before, we haven't done that, and it's become really disjointed, and we're seeing the effects of that really up and down our high streets.
I mean, some of that links into some of the questions and comments in the chat and in the questions and answers. I think it was Jackie Gush who suggested, and it maybe goes to the point you were making, Jackie, around mixed use buildings, but the potential for converting some of these spaces to accommodation. And maybe that links into some of the questions and comments in the chat about affordable housing. Ian, I don't know if you popped your hand up at all to talk, because every time I open the thing, it puts it over your face. I'm so sorry. Ian, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, just a couple of points. I think there's a couple of points coming up about Poole, and I'm a Poole resident and I feel passionate about Poole, and I was on the bid, Poole bid with Jackie until recently, and Jackie knows that I feel really passionate about Poole, and it does need tidying up. I completely agree, and I know Jackie would agree with me on that as well. I think the empty buildings problem is a real issue, and quite often there's ownership issues behind those, and landlords will quite happily let buildings sit empty for some time, and then we know that we get that broken window syndrome very quickly. Once one building starts to dilapidate, becomes dilapidated, it really affects the business next door. And I was in Blackpool recently, and they've suffered terrible decline over the last few years, and that broken window syndrome, you can see what a massive issue it is. Planning is often the real challenge behind this. I'm not making excuses at all, but these issues are incredibly complicated in terms of the amount of owners of different things that involve, different owners of different aspects of these things. And there's been planning capacity issues certainly within BCP Council. And, the council are aware of that and be investing in that area. I think quite often these units are really big, and they're too big to fill. It takes quite a business to come in, and it's a brave move to take on that space. I think a lot of the time the units need to be broken up. And someone had, Nigel Jones had mentioned, I think Bridport feels like a positive experience. I would agree. My family live in Shaftesbury. A lot of the smaller towns, the market towns, seem to have fared much better than some of the larger towns, and I think they have a much higher percentage of independent retailers and independent businesses within there. And I think they're providing a really good visitor experience and haven't suffered in the same way that the larger towns have.
Brian, thanks so much. I'm also just wondering if there's if there are ways that we can, encourage, and I think this links to a question in the discussion about ways that we can work together across some of these big stakeholders like businesses and landlords and residents and the education sector and universities. I know, as Ian mentioned, we work a lot together between BU and the chamber, and we work a lot with, with the councils and stuff like that. But is there more that we can be doing? And there are more partnerships we could create? And what might that look like? And what might that do for our region? Jackie.
I just wanted to really highlight that what happened through the pandemic at the start, BCP Council created something called R3. Now, there are 3 R's and I can't for the life of me remember what they are now, so apologies. But what the R3 did, it got funding through the government, because obviously there was lots of grants flying around at that point, and through the grant funding and the R3 stakeholder group, which pulled together lots of different groups, which is what you're really suggesting, it created a feasibility study that they named Future Stories. That's just come to fruition in the last few months, actually, and it broke down by town what they wanted to see. Obviously, the next step is actually to implement that. And I know that BCP have created a new company called Future Places, and they are looking at regen across the whole area to obviously improve what we're seeing at the moment. So the wheels are in motion. I don't know how far away they are, but obviously it is something like that that needs to take place.
Thanks, Jackie. Ian.
Yeah, I just want to kind of add, it's not all doom and gloom. We are seeing some quite exciting developments, and I can talk most of all about Poole, the place I know, through my work with the BID, but also my work with Legal & General. And there's some really exciting stuff going on in Poole. The Dolphin Centre is the largest indoor shopping centre in Dorset. We know there's been some empty units, but there's been some really good businesses move in there. But as well as Kingdom, what's interesting is there's lots of plans in there for community event space. There's a really interesting business space being developed at the moment called the Foundry, which I've been in to visit, and looks really good. And I think Legal & General have got a really kind of forward-thinking approach and really get how the high street needs to look in the future. So I think those grassroots are in place. Obviously, these things obviously take a long time to filter through, but we are seeing some really forward thinking, I think.
Yeah, and I wonder if some of that, picks up in the comments. I think I'm probably going to pronounce your name wrong, Daphne. But that Daphne said about the shortage of people, may benefit from not only just looking for new and future skill sets that we might need to develop, but thinking about the transferability and the opportunity to move from one industry to another. I'm wondering, Nigel, is that something that we, is that something that we can think about? And is that something that we have evidence of being successful either elsewhere or in history or?
It's about the difference between generic skills and particular skills. So all industries, regardless of what they're producing, need IT skills. All industries need people who can market and sell. So there are a range of skills which should be transferable across sectors. And the difficulty at the moment is that because of the shortages, people are outbidding people within their own industry. So I've heard of a company today that had just lost 2 of its key people to a rival company. And that wouldn't have happened 5 years ago because the competitive pressures between them weren't there. But now we've got these intense competitive pressures. There's a lot of going on between companies in the same industry. So the idea of spreading skills across different industries is great in theory, but it's difficult right now. So it's something that we need to aim for the longer term. And then there are the particular skills, which obviously when a company takes you on with IT skills, it wants you to know its systems, it wants you to know its supply chains, it wants to know its customers. And that's how you get the firms involved in providing the particular skills that are needed within an industry. Very important.
And thinking about industry and the Dorset economy, what role has that really played for us, and how has that changed during the pandemic? Jackie, you wanted to come in on the question that was before, so I'll let you do that, and then maybe I'll go back to that other one for Nigel.
Okay, yeah, it might actually answer your second question as well, actually, because I was at the airport today earlier, and we were talking about how they also are struggling with trying to employability. It's very difficult for them, and what they're saying is that they take on people now to do lots of jobs. So their fire people will actually do grass cutting, for example, and actually, where we got into a situation, certainly from my perspective, from a personal view, where we were only doing one role, and those roles were becoming quite boring, I think, because it was just very siloed. Now, actually, we have the opportunity of saying, actually, it's more than one job. Whether they want those roles is another question, but actually they are becoming more diverse. So let's play on that and give people the opportunity of doing lots of different activities, really. So yeah, there's that opportunity.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jackie. Nigel, was there anything else you might want to say about the how the industry has changed during the pandemic for our region?
There are some short-term issues which are mainly about the immediate impact on supply chain. So aerospace and air travel was a major boom industry for most of the previous 2 decades. Clearly came to a stop in 2020, and its recovery is difficult to foresee. So we had some fantastic aerospace component companies who have struggled in the last 2 years. 3 years ago, I would have been here saying those are the firms we need to concentrate on for the pandemic. So it's the adjustment process we're going through now. How is the aerospace industry going to respond to that? We have some really good firms in that industry. How are we going to respond to the new environment we're working in? Are those skills transferable? Could they be used for energy changes or for the green revolution, things like that? So there are lots of transferable skills there which we need to foster. But picking the industry winners is always very difficult. And I'm quite sure that in 5 years' time, the industry winners will not be the ones I would pick today. That's the nature of economic growth and economic progress. You don't necessarily foresee the ones that are going to be the stars in the future. You just have to help everybody potentially be a star.
Right. Thanks so much. And I can see, Ian, you want to answer that one. And then I was gonna do the flip side, which picks up on what my colleague Maria Musarskaya has put into the chat. But I'll let you go first, and then I'll ask the question that I was going to ask. But over to you.
Yeah, a couple of areas on where we've kind of seen changes in industry over the last couple of years, and the pandemic has probably accelerated change, you know, hugely. Quite often people say kind of 10 years within 2 years. The use of technology is massively improved within business, and I think we need, as I said earlier, we need to keep hold of that for lots of reasons. It gives people a better quality of life. They're not traveling around all the time. I think it's really important for businesses' carbon footprint and achieving net zero, and that's a massive issue that's looming for businesses. And it's disappointing to see that, you know, traffic levels are up or even beyond where they were within the pandemic, which is a real shame. I think we've talked about changing working patterns, not just the use of technology and hybrid working, but there's a pilot going on at the moment for businesses to work on a 4-day week. And this is a really interesting point that I'd be interested to hear Nigel's view around productivity. Those people are still being paid for a 5-day week, but they're doing it over 4 days, really to see, you know, what's the impact on their productivity. I think businesses need to keep looking forward the whole time. And for me, one of the critical issues for business during the pandemic was cash flow. You know, that's king for businesses, and that I think that's a real lesson that needs to come through. And those businesses that fell first, if you like, during the pandemic, really struggle from the cash flow. So businesses with the cash flow, businesses need to really make themselves as resilient as possible. And I think the point that Jackie's made about kind of multi-skilling staff, if you think that's difficult to say, isn't it? Multi-skilling staff is a really good approach as well, that people can do more than one thing. And I think business resilience looking forward is just so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Nigel, did you want to pick up the question about productivity?
I'm old enough to remember the stagflation of the 1970s. That's when I learned my economics. And we had 3-day weeks and things like that. And there were some companies who produced the same, if not more, in 3 days as they used to do in 5 days. So it is possible. It requires careful planning and careful management by company leaders. But, you know, it is possible to produce as much in 4 days as in 5, and therefore pay your people for 5. So it's a very positive outcome that can come from periods like this. But there will be lots of companies who sadly will go to the wall during this period because they will not be able to compete on that level. We used to call them zombie companies. In fact, the Bank of England still calls them zombie companies. And one of the things when the government steps in to keep people afloat is these companies survive, but eventually they will go south. And that's going to be an issue as well. So we're going to lose companies in the next few years because of the stagflation issue. But there are going to be good companies that will emerge with strong productivity, strong growth, and strong wage levels and high skills. And those are the ones that we need to foster as we go forward.
Thank you very much. So then we'll come back to the question that Maria put in the chat around supporting SMEs, and it goes to the point we made earlier around how important SMEs are to our region and our regional economy. What do we think we can do to support them in helping to make sure that they have the necessary skills, and that can, you know, come through from whether the education sector and the role that we can play at Bournemouth University and others, or other things that you might think we can do to support our SMEs. I might ask my colleagues to throw a plug in for the Bournemouth University Business School's Help to Grow program, because that is, if I can be so bold as to answer one of these questions, that is one I would say is probably a great opportunity. It's partially funded by the government, and then you work with colleagues at BU and our business school for management courses to help grow your business. But are there other things that people can do that we can do in the region to support our SMEs? Yeah, I'm kind of looking at you, Ian, a little bit, because you've got quite the background in that area.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in business support for many years before I was at the Chamber as well, and that included helping startup businesses and pre-starts, and also helping those kind of more established businesses scale up. And there is a lot of support around there for businesses, but what's really important is businesses actually do seek out that support and be prepared to invest in it. Some of it is free, but businesses do need to kind of invest in their skills, in their business skills, in terms of running the business as much as training their own staff. I think we've got organisations like business improvement districts. We've got Jackie here today, operating pretty much across the whole of Dorset, providing a good level of support. Dorset Chamber is 75 years old in 2 years, and you know, we're all about business support. We do that by bringing people together to learn from each other, to share best practice. We try to do that in a very community focused way that's enjoyable, not kind of boring delivery and classroom style stuff. And we really facilitate an awful lot of collaboration and networking between businesses where they do really learn from each other, and that's really powerful. We've been delivering a program funded by the Dorset Local Enterprise Partnership called Peer Networks, and that brings groups of business owners together to work together over, let's say, a 6-month period where they meet once a month and really talk about crunchy issues within their business. And there is a real feeling of there's a real sense of camaraderie and trust, and you know, genuine sharing across different sectors. But and there's lots of other business support organisations out there. The Growth Hub, Dorset Growth Hub, do a great job as well in supporting businesses. But it's really important businesses do seek out that support. But there is a lot there, and you know, we're all here to help businesses thrive. It's in the interest of not just the business community, but the whole Dorset economy.
Brilliant. Thanks so much.
I just wanted to ask Ian, do you still have your Young Chamber programs and working with schools? I think that's important.
Yeah, so we were running a program a few years ago called Young Chamber, and the whole point of Young Chamber was to help support careers advice for young people, to perhaps change the perception of some careers with parents, and to really provide a platform to introduce businesses and young people. That was really successful. We did some fantastic stuff. We took school children out to different businesses where they had a tour. That was educating the teachers as well. It was really good stuff. That work does continue, and that's delivered now by the Dorset Careers Hub. And it's so important that young people get really good careers advice and guidance. And you know, my daughter's followed the apprenticeship route, which has been absolutely fantastic for her. But so many parents and carers, you know, and people influencing those young people still don't really understand apprenticeship. So you're right, Nigel, those links between education and business are absolutely crucial.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. So I'll ask one last question, and I'm going to ask each of our panelists, and I'd love it if the audience would jump in with some comments in the chat. What makes Dorset a special place to live and work? I'll go to Nigel first.
people. The people is what's important. Dorset has its different populations in different places, but great cooperation between them is very important to go forward.
Thanks for that, Nigel. Jackie.
I mean, I have to agree with Nigel, actually. Yeah, of course, it's the people first. But over and above that, I think we've got a rich culture, to be honest. I think, we've got heritage, we've got waterside location, we've got the New Forest up the road, we've got lots of heathland in Dorset. I actually think where we live is absolutely amazing. A lot of places in the world don't have what we have. We just need to maximise that opportunity, because I think, honestly, we've been quite lazy. So we just need to work on how we can move forward and benefit from that, really.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jackie. Ian, what are your thoughts?
That we have down here, the variety of businesses, the different sectors that we've got an incredible range of businesses. For me personally, it's the environment. I really love living here. I live on the edge of Poole, near Upton Heath and near Upton House, and I probably say to my wife every day when we walk on the heath, we are so lucky to live here. So for me, it's the environment that's really special, but also the opportunity that's available as well.
Brilliant. And I think the audience is agreeing with you all, because Peter has said people in history. Maria has said great community with welcoming people and activities for anyone. Nigel has said sun, sea, sand, countryside, small, innovative and independent businesses creating a completely unique and amazing environment. Anja has said there's hardly any culture, there is hardly any cycling infrastructure, there's hardly any genuine diversity. So a different kind of point of view there. And I'm so glad I saw earlier you said that you were hearing some positive things in the discussion and that you've enjoyed this evening. For me, it is about the opportunity for a work-life balance here. I have a brilliant job in a brilliant university, and I live in a fantastic place where I can be a tourist in my own county and see something new every day. So it's fantastic. So I want to say thank you very much, everybody, and to our panel members for the brilliant contributions you've made and the discussion, and to our audience for such lively questions and chat. So thank you so much. I'm going to hand back to Emma to close us out for the evening. Thanks so much, everybody.
Brilliant. And thank you to you as well, Shelley, for chairing tonight's discussion and for keeping us all on topic and covering such a diverse range of questions this evening. It's been brilliant. I've really enjoyed tonight's event, and I hope our audience have too. We will be sending out a feedback survey as part of the follow-up email after tonight's event. So please do fill that out if you can and let us know how you found tonight. It just helps us to ensure that we're putting on the best events possible. This is actually the last event in our current online public lecture series, but we are planning a range of exciting events for the next academic year as well. So if you want to find out more about those and other upcoming events from Bournemouth University, you can click on the green button that's at the bottom of your screen to sign up for our newsletter, which shares all the details of upcoming events, or you can visit the Bournemouth University website to find out more as well. We're going to close this event now, but please do feel free to share any final thoughts or comments or observations in the chat. And you'll also be able to come back and watch the recording of tonight's event as well, just by using the same web link that you used to join us this evening. All that's left for me to say is thanks again to our speakers and to Shelley and all of you for joining us this evening. I hope you now have a chance to go out and enjoy this beautiful evening here in Dorset and have a wonderful night. Thank you. Goodbye.